Good morning, everyone. I hope that you had a fabulous Christmas and a blessed Christmas. I had a great Christmas as well. I got to tell you, I thank God that it's over, though. It's sometimes a lot of pressure. But anyhow, I wanted to talk about, there was a few people that have contacted me within the past couple of weeks. And they had said that, there were people who have investigated and looked into and did a lot of digging and reporting on Mica's case and noticed that there was some reiteration of things that have already been reported, and it bothered them. And, because it was stuff that they dug on and they found and they reported on, and, I guess they felt overlooked. I'm not really sure what the issue was. However, I talked to my assistant, Kristen, about it, and, and she's wonderful. She's probably the best investigator there is. She's been working with me a long time now, and she's like a daughter to me. So I really trust her judgment. And she had said, this is not a bad thing. It's a good thing to keep talking about Mica's case and keep bringing it to the forefront, keeping it alive, keeping it going. And if that means we have to reiterate things that have been reported on in the past, then so be it. And she's right. So I'm going to help with that. I'm going to try to do a weekly, pre-recorded, and go over things that have been reported in the past. I have found that by doing that, I found new stuff which can be added to the original material that had been reported, and that's a good thing. So, what I'm going to start off with this week will be, and we will talk about it again on Axiom on Wednesday night, which will be airing this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, will be a video that I had done in June. I think it was June 16th or 19th, I'm not sure, but the title of it is J.P. Miller has painted himself in a corner. Now, what that video really was talking about was that the narrative that kept getting pushed, and still by some people, I don't, they always have a new name. They show up on Facebook and the TT and whatever, and they're always talking about how mentally ill Mica was. Mica was mentally ill. It's like there's the same old, it never changes. And there's never really any substantial proof to back it up, except for altered looking medical records. And so it doesn't really help the narrative. Not for John Paul. Okay. It does help the narrative that she was abused. And she was misdiagnosed and she was mistreated. We can go on and on with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on what was in that video and then add to it things I found while researching this subject again. And I was surprised at what I had found. So first of all, let's start from the beginning. Now, the beginning was the pushing of the mental health and illness narrative and how it does play against John Paul. And obviously it has, because he's been raided. Now, according to the healthdirect.com, to track someone, whether it be by a tracking device or a private investigator or even a bunch of organized stalkers, and let me just reiterate, an organized stalker or group of stalkers does not necessarily have to be hired people. These could be people you've known for years, people that go to your church, people that you know on the internet, people that you've been friends with for years. They play one way and they do another way. Okay. And it seems like that's what they were doing with Mica. Here, this was this grown woman who said, I'm done with this marriage, I'm walking away. And you've got people who are being paid to bring her back. Okay. Like not even asking her, why are you leaving, or even caring why she's leaving. Texting, emailing, showing up at stores, or at her job, or at her church, or whatever. It's like with constant people there working on his behalf in her face. That can bring on feelings of paranoia, even for a perfectly sane person. Okay. Now, in regards to revenge porn, which we know he's done because he admitted it, he can't backtrack. It makes him look stupid, okay? And we know that he is when he does things like that. When he uploaded Mica's nude pictures onto the internet, and which is criminal in 48 states, by the way, it gave rise to a criminal recourse and under civil law that exists at the federal level. This is considered violence against a woman, which is under the Violence Against Women Act. This is a form of harassment, harm, and violation. You can find this on minlaw.com and womenslaw.org. Okay, now that came from the original video, okay? In addition, long-term abuse and tracking and harassment and violating can cause a complex PTSD. These symptoms are anxiety, nightmares, avoidance situations of places and things that are related to a traumatic event, heightened emotional response or impulsivity, difficulty regulating emotions, hypervigilance, frequent negative thoughts and emotions and feelings, that danger is still present. This is also a form of paranoia. This can be found on clevelandclinic.org, by the way. Now, in South Carolina, there are laws to protect vulnerable people, vulnerable adults. Vulnerable adults are anybody over the age of 18 that are either mental or physically ill. Okay? These laws protect them from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. This is under the Omnibus Adult Act, which defines what constitutes abuse and the roles of agencies that investigate abuse reports. So not only is the abuser responsible, but the agencies that were to investigate and did not, or maybe failed that person, and now they end up dead. So John Paul will not be the only one investigated, or is not the only one being investigated here. Okay? Believe me. Now, if any of these cases, the South Carolina case, the Omnibus Adult, what was it called again? I'm sorry, Act is violated, that abuse resulting in death can be a felony up to 30 years in prison. Threatening or intimidating a witness or investigator can be a misdemeanor of $5,000 fine and 3 years in prison. Obstructing an investigator could be a misdemeanor, or an investigation, obstructing an investigation, misdemeanor, $5,000 fine, 3 years in prison. And knowingly exploiting a vulnerable sick adult can be a felony, $5,000 fine, 5 years in prison, and restitution. Now, for all we know, these things can be consecutive. So we're looking at 30 years plus 3 years plus 3 years plus 5. We don't know that, but it can. I'm sure. It's been done before. Now, South Carolina Code Section 16-3-1090 makes it illegal to assist a person in committing attempted unaliving, either by physically participating in the act or maybe administering medication to patients that have a unaliving ideation. According to John Paul, that's what she had, because she attempted before 7 times, if I remember correctly. And if these meds increase that risk, and you're giving them to her either because the records have been altered or falsely filled out for malicious reasons, or you're giving her your medication and it results in death, you could be found with manslaughter or murder. Okay? Now, federal laws regarding abusing someone over state lines, 18 U.S.C. 2261, prohibit interstate travel with the intent to commit DV against an intimate partner, to harass, injure, and intimidate. Okay? However, if you travel those state lines with the intent to surveil, injure, or end a life, That's violating federal law 2261A1. Now, what can happen in that situation is life in federal prison. Okay, just so you know. According to these laws, if you, John Paul, and any of your FMs have assisted you in this, which would be stalking, humiliating, intimidating, violating, punishing, frightening, depriving a sick person of basic needs, isolating, manipulating a sick person, again, you violated the Omnibus Adult Act. Okay. If you've given her meds, and I've explained this earlier, so let me just explain it along. Let me just explain what it means. If you've given her meds that had side effects of self-unaliving, stating that she tried this 7 times before, and either she didn't need the meds, or they did not belong to her, or you paid someone to alter the medical records to coerce her into taking these meds that she did not need, especially where there was without a clinical physical exam to rule out any other medical conditions. Or if, by the way, if the medical professional altered the medical records fraudulently, filling them out with malicious intent, for all of you, this can result in prosecution of manslaughter and murder, okay? Because she ended up passing away. You can't push that self-unaliving. You will be found responsible for her death. If you placed a weapon in her hand with the knowledge of previous attempts, and you tried to coerce her to harm herself, once again, manslaughter or murder. Okay. Now, it doesn't necessarily, by threats or extreme manipulation or coercion that is less direct, but still significant in contributing to that decision to unalive themselves, you also still can be found with manslaughter or murder. Okay? Now, if you cross the state lines and you did violate this 2261A1, which ended up in her death, and there's proof that there was DV before that. For example, she went, to visit somebody and you manipulated her to come back, and there's proof of that. Or you intimidated her, or you violated her in a way, or you surveilled her, or something comes up that shows proof of that, and she ends up dead. There'll be twice the max term. Now, if she didn't end up dead, it would be twice the max term of 5 years in federal prison with previous offenses of DV, with stalking and harassing and violating, put her pictures up on the internet, exploiting, whatever it is that she has on that list, that affidavit. If that's proven true and she didn't pass, you could be with 2 terms of 5 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine and restitution. However, if she passes away, okay, you have violated, as I said, 18 U.S.C. 2261A and 2261A1, where you have life in federal prison. Now, for clarification, according to the FBI.gov/investigate, the only reason why the North Carolina Police Department or Sheriff's Department would request assistance from the South Carolina FBI or Attorney General is because their investigation showed suspects or activities that span both South and North Carolina. So there you go. So why did they raid John Paul's house and not his church and not Trisha and not anyone else that's related to the money part, but just his home? Why did the warrant say what it said? Because this is what they're going after, because, John Paul, you've painted yourself into a corner. And by pushing the fact that she's mentally ill, either through you and your 7,000 different accounts on social media, or the FMs that you got running around as organized stalkers, pushing this narrative for you, is only playing against you. Because one way or another, it's either going to prove that you've assaulted, violated, exploited, and pushed a sick person, as you put it, to their death, or you are directly and or indirectly related. So what does indirectly mean? Indirectly means you hired somebody to do it, or you did it yourself. Those are only three ways that it could have happened. You will be found responsible for one of those three ways. And that's why they raided you on November 1st. And anybody who assisted you, including agencies that got calls and calls and calls and calls to help her and did not help her, whether they were in your pocket or because they're just stupid, they will also be found responsible. Medical professionals who altered medical records or fraudulently put things in those medical records to push these meds on her, meds that were not meant for her, will also be part of the takedown of you. You've pulled down a whole community of people, professionals, who should have known better, but instead they helped you unalive this poor girl. That's basically what's happened. And so that's the addendum of the video that was done back in June called John Paul Miller Has Painted Himself into a Corner. And like I said, I'm going to try to do this on a weekly basis. And I don't know what I'm going to do next week. I could either touch on the PowerPoint presentation from Robeson County, which talks about 1281 Princess Anne Road, or we could talk about the 911 call. Either way, one of them will come up. But we will touch on this and we will keep it alive and going until we see John Paul and his FMs in handcuffs and doing a perp walk. And for everybody from protesters to people reiterating old news and that things have been reported, or the ones who are reporting on new stuff, God bless you. Keep it going. I thank God for you that you're keeping Mica's case alive. Even Fitz News just brought up the 911 call that was reported back in July of Andy the neighbor, if you remember that, where he was talking about H trafficking. And he accused JP of being part of that. So keep it going. Please keep it going. Until I see you again. And if I don't see you beforehand, Happy New Year. Have a blessed New Year. We will be on January 1st, Wednesday, which is this coming Wednesday, Axiom, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we will be talking about this, about Mica. We will talk about it on both YouTube and Rumble. And then when we're moving on to the next subject, which will be, subjects that YouTube can handle, then we will be moving on to just Rumble. So please join us on YouTube and Rumble Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, Happy New Year, stay safe, and God bless.